89, Past Fragment, Bloodstream's Last Stand. 2016, Italy. Our target, Leonard Hargraves, faced his team in his human form, as Freddie Sabino, alias Bloodstream. Pictures of the man that the psycho used to be appeared on the screen, right next to the bloody abomination he had turned into. Short black hair, a tired face aged by stress, brown eyes, an unremarkable man for a terrible destiny. Born 1980 in Otranto, Italy, to a fisherman and a housewife, Freddie Sabino married young, dropped out of college when his girlfriend expected a child, and then joined the Otranto Polizia Municipale, the only job he ever had. His wife abandoned him for another man before last Easter, leaving him to raise two young children alone. A daughter, Len, perhaps a shorthand for Lenora, and a son, Cesare. In short, there was nothing special about the man. If the apocalypse hadn't happened, Freddie Sabino might have lived a normal life. Put money on the side, watched his kids go to college, perhaps marry again. Though the alchemist sent wonder boxes to families or isolated individuals, a few elixirs ended up in the hands of law enforcement on last Easter's Eve, usually because they were mistaken for drug batches or letter bombs. When the apocalypse began and genomes rampaged in Otranto, Freddie Sabino stole 2 elixirs from his police station and fled the city. They would never know to whom these elixirs had been sent, before the police confiscated them. Perhaps if they had reached their intended owners, a great many tragedies could have been averted. We know Sabino was active as a psycho as early as 2009. Leo showed his team a phone picture of a bloody monster boarding a rusted car, alongside 2 children no older than 12. Reports indicated he has traveled with his children since the late 2000s, though his son was only confirmed as alive in 2012. Someone among the audience raised a gloved hand. Leo responded with a nod. Yes? Do the children have powers too? Mr. Wave asked. The oddest member of the group, he was a creature of living wavelengths, and rarely took things seriously. Mr. Wave is not going all out on kids, even if they're genomes. The kids are powerless, said Matthias Martel. The 16-year-old teen had insisted on joining the carnival after his mother's dementia, determined to complete her work. He had proved invaluable as an information gatherer, though not as much as Pythia. Ace nodded with a dark look on her face. He would have killed them if they were genomes. Nothing indicates that they are complicit in their father's crimes, Leo continued. According to Pythia's psyche report, Bloodstream remains violently protective of his children even in his current state. However, he also keeps them dependent on him through social isolation, gaslighting, and physical abuse. Leo had seen many similar cases in London, far too many. These fathers convinced their children the world was out to get them, and that they could only rely on their kin. We must ensure the children's safety, especially that of Len Sabino, but I will come back to them in a few moments. Leo continued his exposé on their target's capabilities. Bloodstream is a green/blue type. His green power grants him complete control over his blood. He can reshape it into weapons, create tentacles, restructure his body. His blue power turns him into pure information. It might have allowed him to enter computer systems, had he remained a pure blue. It would have made him easier to kill. But as it is often the case with psychos, his 2 powers mutated to form a unique synergy. Bloodstream became his blood, literally. Each of his blood cells hosts his consciousness, allowing him to reform as long as one remains. Nothing short of disintegration will slay him. We need your flames, the Cossack guessed. Leonard nodded. Which leads us to his ghastliest ability, the reason why he has remained undefeated for so long and accumulated a 4-digit body count. If Bloodstream's blood cells enter another human's circulatory system, then he can take it over. Like a virus, he will overwrite foreign cells' information with his own. Your DNA, your mind, your memories. If Bloodstream touches you, you are worse than dead. Leonard marked a short pause for emphasis. You are him. What do you think? Shorty asked, as she wiped sweat off her forehead. Her clothes had turned black and dirty, but she looked at her work with pride. Standing on the boathouse's pier at her side, Ryan didn't share her enthusiasm. That it will be a miracle if we reach Spain, let alone the USA. The boathouse smelled of rust and decaying paint, its ceiling threatening to fall apart any moment. The 10-meter-long vessel floated in a water pond with direct access to the Tyrrhenian Sea, a pineapple-shaped, clunky mass of metal. The machine's shape and rusty brown color scheme reminded Ryan of the Ictinio II, one of the world's earliest submarines. It didn't inspire confidence. Len pinched him in the arm in response. The Leica will work fine, she said. We'll reach America in 12 days according to the autopilot. Ryan squinted at her with skepticism. The Leica? Like the dog the Russians sent to space. And they wanted to go to the USA? She would never fit in. You do know she died midway through the mission, right? You've condemned us all. Len tried to pinch him in the arm again, but Ryan saw it coming. He dodged her vicious attack, and responded by grabbing her by the waist and treacherously kissing her on the neck. Her skin was soft to the touch, and she let out a cute gasp of surprise. Riri, not here, she whispered in protest, putting her hands on his own. Just a kiss, Ryan begged, his lips moving to her cheeks. Come on, we deserve it. We've been working on this thing nonstop for weeks. Riri, you're insane, Len whispered, but she didn't fight him back either. Eventually, she gave in. Okay, but 5 minutes tops. They made out for 15, her hand in his hair, his own on her back. Len tasted of oil and salt water, but Ryan didn't care. He wouldn't have stopped for anything in the world. But like all good things, it was over too soon. That was foolish, Len said while breaking the embrace, though her blushing cheeks disagreed. If she had let him, Ryan wouldn't have stopped at mere kisses. Their first night together had been a logistical nightmare. First, they had to find pre-war pills which hadn't expired, and unused condoms. Then they had to wait for her father to wander away, so he wouldn't catch them in the act. When the right moment came, Ryan and Len realized they had no idea how to proceed. Nobody taught them the finer details, so their kisses and touches had been horribly clumsy. But they figured it out. For a moment, Ryan and Len had been alone in the world. Two halves made one. Ryan wouldn't have stopped it one night, but her father never let them out of sight for long anymore. Not since the carnival started hunting his clones. The two teens had to settle on furtive kisses and caresses, always fearing discovery. The situation made Ryan die a little inside each day. Len's father was always there. Always between them. Always ruining their chance at happiness. Always causing them trouble. And now, that insane maniac had decided the family would leave Europe altogether and migrate to America. What logical process Bloodstream went through to reach this idea, Ryan would never understand. But he didn't leave his charges any choice. Porto-Venere had been a small coastal town before the apocalypse, a few colored houses built next to long piers. The locals had abandoned the place long before their group moved in. It was isolated enough that nobody would locate their hideout, but close enough to Genoa for supply runs. Though Ryan himself was the only one who left the house nowadays. Shorty spent her time working on her submarine, while her father hid in their temporary home. The carnival fell on them whenever Bloodstream went out in public, but Ryan could slip out unnoticed if he took precautions. Can you bring back oranges and citruses, if you find any? Len asked Ryan, as he prepared to leave the boathouse through a small door. We risk scurvy with our current reserves. I'll do what I can, he said, before freezing it. His hand reached the door lock. "Hey, Shorty. You said everything on the sub is automated? No manual controls?"
"Yeah,"
she said with a sigh. "I can do a lot with my power, but scavenged boats aren't the best source of materials available. I had to sacrifice some features to make the whole thing work. What if we have a problem on the way? Well, the sub will automatically redirect to the nearest shore. Hopefully, Dad will protect us in the meantime." Ryan looked over his shoulders, their eyes meeting. "It's your dad I worry about." Len bit her lower lips and crossed her arms. "Riri, my position hasn't changed." Ryan had tried to convince her to run away with him a dozen times already. To leave her father stranded on the shore while they fled across the sea. Bloodstream might have an uncanny ability to locate his daughter whenever she wandered off, but he couldn't swim across the Atlantic either. But Shorty wouldn't listen. Ryan could argue and scream all he wanted, yet she remained stubborn as a mule. "They'll keep coming after him," he warned her. "As long as he lives, they will never let us go." "They won't pursue us across the sea," she replied stubbornly. "I heard their leader, the living sun, can fly at supersonic speeds and even in space," Ryan countered. "It will take us days to cross the ocean, and hours for him." "But they didn't find us yet." "They had hidden well, true." "They can't find us, Riri." She meant it as a statement, but it sounded like a fervent prayer instead. Truthfully, Ryan wondered if it would be a bad thing if the carnival cornered their guardian and slew him for good. However, he was worried they wouldn't stop at Bloodstream alone, since people had seen the family travel together. Ryan and Len might be flagged as the psycho's accomplices, and face the same punishment. And yet, he couldn't help but dream of a sun falling down on Bloodstream at night. Ryan opened the door with a sigh, and moved through the rest of the building. He guessed it had been a boat club once, where rich people could store their ships, watch soccer on TV, and relax in restaurants. Cesare. His shrilling voice chilled Ryan to the bone, making the boy freeze in place. The young teen followed the voice to the house's dining room. Bloodstream slouched on a tattered sofa, right in front of the TV. This was the last clone, as far as Ryan could tell. The carnival had hunted them so relentlessly that the group had to flee civilization altogether. "Come here," the psycho said, gesturing at a spot to his left. Ryan reluctantly obeyed, his kind and well-adjusted stepfather pointing at the TV. "It's Power Rangers." "You remember Power Rangers?" The TV's screen had long turned into shattered glass, but Ryan indulged the delusional psycho. "I remember, Dad. You were so obsessed with this series, that you always pestered me to buy you toys," Bloodstream said, shaking his head. I wish I had the money to back then. I really wanted to make you happy, Cesare." "It's okay, Dad," Ryan lied, going through the motions. "No, it's not okay," he said, moving his head closer to his captive's ear. "Your sister is sick, Cesare. She's very sick." A shiver went down Ryan's spine. "Len looks healthy to me," he protested. But the psycho didn't listen. "She's sick, Cesare. All of us who took this poison, we're all sick. The disease is in us. It drove the whole world mad. I think they put demons in these bottles. I know, because I dream of hell." You dream of hell? A green hell. I wander its wriggling womb at night. The floor pulsates like your heart, the walls have mouths and eyes. And the air. I feel 1,000 microscopic flies move into my lungs as I breathe. Even the water looks back and speaks to me. Hell is alive, Cesare. It's an infestation. Satan distributed these bottles to poison the whole human race with his brood. Ryan said nothing, knowing better than to talk back to Bloodstream while he was raving nonsense. You know what cancer is, Cesare? Your grandma died from it. It's insidious, cancer. It grows inside of you, it intertwines with your organs like a tree's roots in fertile soil. You have to be careful about removing it, or you destroy the whole garden. Bloodstream patted his adoptive son's shoulder, as if congratulating him for winning a soccer game. I'll find a way to operate on your sister one day. Make her healthy again. I'll figure something out, don't worry. Ryan remained still, clenching his fists. As he knew, it was only a matter of time before he looked at his own daughter for sustenance. The psycho hadn't fed in weeks, and his lucidity kept degrading. If you and your sister die, I don't know what I will do. I love you. I love you both so much. Bloodstream started sobbing, holding his head in his hands. Ryan didn't know how to react, so he said nothing. I'm sorry, Cesare, Bloodstream said, the fluid making up his body shifting like a raging sea. I'm sorry. I couldn't. I just wanted to protect you both, and I ruined it all. Now Len is sick, and I'm sick too. I'm sick, Cesare. Ryan looked at this deluded, sobbing monster. He wanted to hate him, to strike him in return for the years of fear and abuse, but in that moment, he didn't fear Bloodstream anymore. He pitied the man inside. You're all I've left, he whimpered. Your mother is gone. Our house is gone. I don't know what to do, that place, it's calling me. One day I won't come back, and, your sister. Ryan winced in a mix of pity and disgust, a warm feeling filling his innards. He carefully raised a hand, putting it on the bloody monster's shoulder. He was warm and slippery to the touch. It's okay. I'll protect Len, I swear. The physical contact seemed to soothe Freddie Sabino, his outer layers becoming as peaceful as a Japanese pond. I'm sure your mom is waiting for us on the other side of the ocean, he said, with a shaking, hopeful voice. She always wanted to go to L.A. She's waiting for us there, you'll see. We'll start over. Make everything right.
Yeah,
Ryan lied. He felt like reassuring a child with cancer, telling him he would go to heaven. It will be all right, Dad. And for a brief moment, he believed it. Ryan lied to himself so well, that for a second, he thought Bloodstream could improve. That the man inside could reassert control, that Ryan could call himself Ryan, not Cesare, that he could marry Len, build a house near the sea, and raise children in peace. A simple dream, for a simple person. The dream quickly turned into a nightmare. Bloodstream looked at the broken TV, as if suddenly inspired. If you die, he said, his voice no longer shaking. If you and your sister die, I'll kill everyone. Bloodstream said that so softly, Ryan found it almost soothing. And then the young teen understood the words, and they chilled him to the bone. I'll kill everyone, and then I'll kill myself, Bloodstream continued, lost in his delirium. A world where children can die, it's just not worth existing. We'll all be together on the other side. It can't be hell if we're all together, right? Bloodstream didn't say a word after that confession. He spent his time on the sofa, looking at the shattered screen with a frightening intensity. A psychotic shooter mentally preparing himself for the crime. And Ryan went right back to hating him. He was angry at himself too, for pitying that monster even for a second. For thinking that things could turn around, making him forget all the horrors Bloodstream inflicted on his family and countless others. If there had been a man inside that bloody head of his, the monster had devoured him years ago. Ryan hesitated for 10 minutes to leave the house, worrying that he might return to find Len dead at her father's hands. He always felt this way whenever he left these two alone. One day it would happen. The fresh air outside didn't bring him any comfort, as he walked towards his bike with a bag on his back. A thought gnawed the teen's mind like a worm in an apple. Len would never make it to America alive. Ryan could feel it in his bones. The proximity, the isolation, her father would lose control. He would weep and regret, but he would do the terrible deed. If not during the trip itself, then on arrival. He was a ticking time bomb, and one day he would go off. Bloodstream had to die. For Len's good, and everyone else's. Ryan opened his bag, and examined the violet elixir he always kept inside. Thankfully, Bloodstream only detected elixirs inside Genome's blood, but that meant he would know the second his adoptive son used the potion on himself. The liquid swirled inside the syringe as if alive, a promise of power and freedom. Perhaps it could give Ryan a power stronger than Bloodstream's? Unlikely, but what else could he do? A second sun flew across the skies, answering his prayers. The carnival's screen shifted to a graphic representation of the possession process. A drop of blood infected an adult man, spreading through his veins like an infection, devouring the organs from within. The skin soon ruptured to let the lifeblood out, and Bloodstream was born again. He will infect your blood like a virus and restructure your body into a clone of himself. In fact, we believe he did it so often that his current body isn't the original one. A tense silence followed Leo's explanations, as his team digested the information. All his copies share his powers and form a loose hive mind, like a larger body's cells. So if Mr. Wave kills half of them at once, the other half will fear him? The boastful Genome slouched on his chair. This is Mecrin all over again. Not quite, but close, Leo confirmed. To get rid of him, we must destroy all his copies and leave nothing behind. Not even a droplet. Each time we ambush a clone, I will incinerate it and Stitch will sterilize the area afterward. Fortunately, Bloodstream is a lone wolf psycho. Unlike people like Adam the Ogre, he lacks a support network. He is a pack of his own, the Cossack said. Yes, and his clones never moved more than 1 mile from each other, perhaps to maintain their hive mind. If we isolate Bloodstream's doubles from bystanders, we can eliminate them one by one. Like a scalpel cutting out a tumor before it can proliferate. Do we know where they are? Ace asked. I didn't find any intel in Pythia's data. Matthias nodded, having successfully followed their trail. The family travels across Italy in an irregular pattern and never stays in the same place for long, but they were last sighted near the Alps. Once we engage, we must pursue Bloodstream relentlessly and keep him away from populated areas, Leonard said. Does his power have any limit? Ace turned to face Stitch. Did you finish examining the biological samples we could find? I did, the plague doctor confirmed with a nod. I was waiting for this meeting to fact-check the intelligence our leader had gathered. Leonard smiled. Though the carnival was a tight-knit group, they operated in individual cells and only gathered in one place for debriefings or large operations. This structure allowed each member a great deal of flexibility, and made the group highly resilient. Members might die, but someone would always survive to revive the carnival. First of all, he can only control his own blood, Leonard explained, showing pictures of Bloodstream bisecting an Augusti genome with a crimson, crystallized axe. He cannot telekinetically control your blood, unless he infects you first. Neither can he generate mass out of thin air, which is why he needs hosts to duplicate himself. No voodoo doll mumbo-jumbo then? Mr. Wave asked. Mr. Wave hates those. I had enough with manic plague, Ace agreed with a shrug. Next, he can only manage a few clones at a time, with a highest recorded peak of 10 doubles. If they break that limit, the clones start absorbing each other to reduce their numbers, probably to reduce the risk of them developing individual thoughts. He can only affect humans, so. Stitch raised his hand. Yes, Stitch? Sir, with all due respect, the doctor coughed. You are wrong. Len was selecting which books to bring with her to the sub, when the explosion resonated outside. The whole boathouse trembled, a metal panel falling on the Leica and bouncing off its hull. The genius stumbled and lost her grip on her books. Some safely fell on the pier, but her copy of Lenin's The State and Revolution sank into the pond, to her horror. What's happening? Her father didn't answer. A smell of smoke and flames came from the sea, carried inside the boathouse by the wind. Dad? Dad? Someone opened the boathouse's door with a backpack full of canned food. Riri? He looked exhausted, as if he had run for miles. Riri, what's happening? We have to go, he said, catching his breath. They're here. The carnival. Her worst fear had come to pass. Another explosion echoed in the distance, like a bombardment. It's his last body, Len realized in panic. If they kill him now. Dad is delaying them, Ryan said, grabbing her books off the floor. We have to go. Go? Go where? The genius looked into her boyfriend's eyes, and she understood. No, Len said. Maybe Dad will beat them. Many tried to kill him, but he had never lost. Her father always came back, always beat the odds. He had fought the Augusti, Raiders, and Heroes, and he defeated them all. The carnival would fail like the others. We have to run, Shorty. They're too numerous, your father can't beat them all. Ryan leapt on the sub, carefully moving towards the hatch. Activate the sub, your dad will catch up to us in minutes. Len wanted to protest further, but the sheer panic in his voice convinced her. She followed her boyfriend, opening the hatch and slipping together inside the sub. It was a cramped place, with only 3 rooms, one at the back for the machinery, one for stockpiled supplies, and the living space. Len had sacrificed space for efficiency, keeping only a bunk bed next to a small porthole and the sub's control panel. It had taken them days to find a computer to scavenge for the screen and keyboard. How did they find us? Len asked, typing on the computer while Ryan put her books and his food in the storage room. Did they follow you? I wasn't careful. Something in his unapologetic tone made her pause. She interrupted her work to look at him, and immediately saw the guilt in his gaze. You didn't care to hide, Len accused him. You led them here. He didn't even deny it. No, he couldn't have. Riri. Len, your father is sick, he said, his gaze firm. He's sick in the head. I know, she hissed, grinding her teeth, I know that, but nothing, Ryan interrupted her. If we don't flee, he'll kill us. He'll kill you. He won't, she protested, though some part of her wasn't so sure. Riri, I had my elixir for weeks, and he never. Not yet, Ryan said, a dark look on his face. Not yet is not never, Shorty. So you will let him die? Len trembled with rage. You will strand him on the shore, and let the carnival slay him? Ryan tried to find his words. We don't need him. I can make you happy, Len. We can start again, just the 2 of us. How? She asked, shaking her head. We can't defend ourselves. You're a genius, and I have my elixir. We can take care of ourselves. This is madness. This whole plan was madness from the start, but that's the best we have. His hands reached for her. Len. Don't touch me. Len hissed, her back against the porthole. Ryan froze, her rejection hurting him as much as it hurt her. Why? Why? For us, he snapped. For us. For you. Tears formed in her eyes. You want me all for yourself. I want you alive. His words made her flinch, as if he had slapped her. She looked at Ryan's eyes, and saw the concern in them. She had been mistaken, he didn't do it for himself, but for her. He loved her, as much as she loved him. A part of her wanted to do as he said. To drop everything and take that submarine to the sea. To go on an adventure around the world, just the two of them. But each time she looked at the monster her father had become, she remembered the kind man he had once been. How he always smiled at her and her brother, her real brother. How he was always there after Mom left, always consoling Len when she cried in her bed. Sometimes, the man reasserted himself, and in these brief moments, his daughter felt hope. Please, Ryan. As long as he's alive, there's a chance he can heal. In spite of everything, Len couldn't bring herself to hate her father. Not without him, Len said, avoiding his disappointed gaze. I'm sorry, Riri, not without him. His intense, baleful stare made her shiver. His hands trembled, his teeth grinded together, his face twisted. Len saw the anger, the disappointment, the sadness, flash through his face. And then came the resignation. Put on the autopilot, Ryan said, while moving towards the hatch. If we're not back in 20 minutes, your father and I are dead. Riri, if I put the autopilot on, I can't disable it. If you stay, they might kill you, he said darkly, they might kill us all, just to make sure Bloodstream is really gone. It was always the same pattern. When people failed to kill Len's father, they came after Ryan and her. It was always their family against the world. Ryan, Len whispered, as he was halfway through the open hatch. He stopped. Ryan, please come back. He looked over his shoulder. Live, Len, he said before exiting the sub. Len activated the autopilot, put on the timer, and waited. Leo frowned. What do you mean, his power has no upper limits? After analyzing the samples we gathered, I confirm that our target is not limited to human hosts. Anything with a circulatory system can do, including the entire animal kingdom. The doctor marked a short pause. Nor does he seem biologically limited in the number of clones active at once. Both restrictions, I'm afraid, are purely psychological. A shiver went down Leonard's spine. He fought the urge to turn into a living son again, to chase away the fear. If Stitch was correct, then. But why would he keep only a dozen doubles? Matthias asked with skepticism. Especially if they share a pseudo-hive mind? Why do they even attack each other? I could understand if each clone was independent, but... Because he hates himself deep down, the Cossack guessed laconically. What he has become. A part of Freddie Sabino wished for death. His psychological traumas crippled his power, preventing him from making full use of his unlimited potential. Ace exchanged a glance with Leonard, her face white as milk. She had understood the danger too. Stitch, be honest, she asked the doctor. If he goes all out, what will happen? He will become a pandemic, Stitch confirmed. Since he can infect others through blood projectiles, Sabino will devastate Italy within days unless quarantined. If he assimilates birds or fish, then the bloodstream plague could infect the entire Earth's biosphere within months. Only genomes with abnormal bodies like Augustus will survive. There it was. The extinction event Pythia warned them against. Bloodstream wouldn't just destroy all life on Earth, he would become life itself. A deathly silence followed, quickly broken by the unflappable Cossack. The trigger is his daughter's death? Not the brother's? Pythia couldn't explain it either, Leonard confirmed. Her data only held Broadstokes information. The future was ever shifting, and other genomes often interfered with her visions. But if Len Sabino dies, her father will trigger an extinction event. We can assume our target will lose all psychological restraints and go on a rampage, Stitch explained. He will hate the world more than he hates himself, Ace whispered sadly. Stitch nodded in agreement. And according to Pythia's prophecy, Len Sabino will perish unless we intervene. The Cossack crossed his arms. He has to die. No matter the cost. No, not at any cost, Mr. Wave protested. No touching the children. Besides sharing your moral concern, our only advantage over Bloodstream is that he doesn't understand the full extent of his abilities, Leo said. We must slay all the clones in a short period, and move the children to safety. Ace, you will focus on evacuating the wounded to the infirmary. Stitch, Matthias, you stay in the reserve. Matthias Martel immediately protested. But. No buts, young man. Haven't you heard? Your range is too short, and if he hits you once, it's over. The battle was still ongoing when Ryan exited the boat club. He didn't have to look long to locate the battlefield, he just had to follow the smoke rising in the skies. His plan had been simple. Take no precautions during the supply run, make sure the carnival's flyers noticed him, and let them follow him back to their hideout. Ryan worried they might have expected a trap if he approached them directly, but his scheme had worked like a charm. At least, until now. This plan was insane. Ryan knew it from the start. It was a harebrained plot born out of frustration and desperation, one last attempt to get out of an impossible situation. But Len refused to budge, even after he forced her hand. And now, he had set the dominoes, and couldn't undo their fall. This could only end in tears. Unless. Ryan looked at his elixir, at the strange power in a syringe. It had caused so much pain, and yet created so many wonders. Maybe Bloodstream had been right, and it was the devil's work. Maybe it was a gift of the heavens. But whether it came from above or below, that substance was Ryan's only hope. He slammed the syringe into his arm, and prayed for a miracle. The world turned purple, and Ryan ran. 90, past fragment, the first run. The world turned purple, as time slowed down to a crawl. Raindrops froze in midair, never reaching the ground. A lightning bolt coursed through the skies, a scar of light in the heavens. Ryan didn't even hear the sound of his footsteps as he moved. He had wished for more time, and the elixir obliged. The boy knew it deep within his bones, an instinct as natural as breathing. Ryan Romano halted time itself with a thought, much like a player could pause a video game. But not forever. A flash of light overcame his vision, followed by the noise of explosions and cold rainwater falling on him. Time began again, and Ryan nearly tripped on a puddle of water. Damn, did he need to focus on his power to keep time frozen? Whatever the case, Ryan kept following the noise. He caught sight of Leo the living sun floating above the sea, unleashing streams of fire at Porto Veneers Marina. The place used to be a touristic walkway, with multi-story colored houses facing piers meant for yachts. Years afterward, the paint had turned gray and lifeless, and the boats into scrapped husks. Ryan could hardly see the battle with the downpour. He activated his power, and the world turned purple. This time, Ryan started to count in his head. 1, 5, 9, 10. And time resumed. Ryan could halt time for 10 seconds or so. Afterward, his power failed him again. The boy attempted to stop the clock again each second, finally succeeding on the 10th try. He could pause the universe for 10 seconds, but had a cooldown period of the same length. A pretty straightforward power, all things considered. But would it make any difference? Bloodstream packed a mean punch, but he was fighting Leo. The living son. Ryan heard rumors that the guy fought Augustus and lived. Ryan searched inside his pockets and brought out a small revolver he always carried on his person. He took a deep breath, cursed his luck, and approached the battlefield. He was fast. Leonard couldn't believe his luck when he glimpsed at a boy matching the description of Bloodstream's son Cesare scavenging supplies while on a routine patrol. The carnival had lost track of the psycho days ago, even wondering if he managed to flee Italy. Leonard had called his allies, and immediately tracked down the boy to his father's hideout. Leo went into battle with only the Cossack and Mr. Wave for backup. The former's white power armor would protect him from blood infection, while the latter had no circulatory system of any kind. Ace stayed on standby in a safe location, ready to teleport the wounded to Stitch's infirmary if needed. The Cossack had suggested burning the entire town to ensure Bloodstream perished. Kids be damned, but his teammates put their veto to that course of action. They would do this by the book. Unfortunately, Bloodstream must have sensed the trio's approach and ambushed them near the town's ruined marina. Leo bombarded the walkway with flames, while the Cossack did the same with a laser rifle. They only managed to set a deserted restaurant on fire, as Bloodstream dodged all their attacks. The bloody slime leaped from one spot to another like a flea. Meddlers, annoyers. Why does everyone insist on harassing me? Bloodstream shrieked. His voice struck Leonard as shrilling and high-pitched, like a young child throwing a tantrum. Has every man on this godforsaken planet gone mad? The pressurized blood making up Bloodstream's skin crystallized into spikes, which he launched in all directions. Leonard didn't bother to dodge, his solar body incinerating the projectiles before they could even reach him. Even the raindrops formed a cloud of steam around him, the skies darkening above their heads. The Cossack flew away with his jetpack, but one spike hit his chest. The blood spear turned into a drill and attempted to dig a path to the human below the armor. While Leo immediately stopped harassing Bloodstream to burn away his projectile before it could infect his teammate, the psycho moved towards a half-rusted car near the walkway. His fingers turned into tentacles as they seized the vehicle. Ever since I took these potions, this world has been tormenting me. Bloodstream lifted the car above his head and prepared to toss it at the carnival's flying members. Trying to take my children away from me. And all your troubles didn't prepare you for. A new, costumed challenger appeared on the ground, a crimson blur. Mr. Wave. The living wavelength ran towards Bloodstream, his body turning into a laser. Mr. Wave transformed into a mass of crimson light moving in a straight line that cut through anything in its path. The superhero's laser form tore Bloodstream in half, the car falling on the bisected psycho. Mr. Wave returned to his humanoid form a few meters away, doing some footwork as if slowing down. While he could move at light speed in laser form, the superhero could only move in a straight line and needed to transform back to turn around. He had once confessed to Leonard that his greatest fear was to be ejected into space, unable to turn back. Ugh. Mr. Wave has bloodstains on his cashmere. Mr. Wave complained while looking at his suit. Bloodstream's two halves quickly fused back together, and he crawled out of beneath the car. You have made a powerful enemy today, tomato juice. Just die. Bloodstream turned both his hands into sharp axes, extended his arms into 5 meters long tentacles, and attempted to behead Mr. Wave with a scissor blade motion. The superhero put his hands in his pockets and dodged the strike with a back step. Lady Death once had a near Mr. Wave experience, the superhero replied, as Bloodstream frantically pursued him like an enraged bull after a matador. Mr. Wave is too good for heaven, and too scary for hell. Leonard had to resist the urge to tell his teammate to stop with the boasts. Mr. Wave was good-natured and powerful, but also an unrepentant show-off. Still, his taunts worked. Bloodstream focused entirely on Mr. Wave and ignored his allies, giving them some respite. Once the Psycho got too close for the superhero to dodge in his human form, Mr. Wave tore through his foe again in laser form. No damage lasted long, the maddened criminal pulling himself back together in seconds. "You're all right?" Leo asked the Cossack after burning the blood drill to ashes. "How much blood does he have?" the armored man grunted back, as he glanced at the walkway below them. Bloodstream spikes had turned back into liquid blood, slithering back to their owner. "I can't tell." Bloodstream compressed the blood making up his body, so he might carry tons of organic mass in that slender frame of his. "I could incinerate him with one fireball, if we can immobilize him. I don't want to go all out in case he keeps his children hidden nearby, I might wound them by accident." Easier said than done though. Leonard and the Cossack flew above the walkway, trying to keep up with their allies' duel with Bloodstream. Upon realizing he couldn't damage the Psycho for long, Mr. Wave switched to a defensive strategy. One moment he stood in one place, challenging Bloodstream with hand gestures and lazy footwork, and when his foe threatened to slice him, the superhero took a step forward, turned into a laser, and reappeared a few meters away. But though Bloodstream lacked finesse, Leo had a hard time tracking his movements. He was a red blur, a cheetah, his body twisting at impossible angles. "Stop dodging!" Bloodstream leaped from a building's wall to the walkway in an attempt to catch Mr. Wave from an unexpected angle, but the living wavelength saw it coming and dodged with a mere sidestep. He didn't even need to transform. Mr. Wave doesn't move at light speed. Light moves at Mr. Wave's pace. "Sure," the Cossack said, the back of his power armor opening to reveal missile launchers. A rain of rockets fell upon the walkway, alongside the rain and lightning. Concrete and stone exploded into a cloud of dust, obscuring Leonard's sight. Leo guessed his allies' plan, to force Bloodstream's parts to reform after blasting him to smithereens. Mr. Wave reappeared close to a ruined restaurant, wiping blood off his suit, but the enemy remained out of sight. The dust cloud spread over the marina, obscuring both the boats and the pavement. "Catch!" Bloodstream screamed from within the smoke. A second later, a rusted boat flew across the skies in the flyer's direction. Leonard and the Cossack blasted it apart before it could hit them, parts falling into the sea. However, the Psycho leaped at them while they were distracted, emerging from the dust cloud with a maniacal laugh. Bloodstream had stretched his right arm and twisted it on itself, building up strength like an elastic spring. He punched the Cossack in the chest before the armored warrior could retaliate, his empowered fist as powerful as a cannonball. The blow cracked the Cossack's chest plate, the armored warrior crashing on the walkway. Stone broke beneath him on impact. "Cossack!" Leonard shouted, his teammate laying on the road, motionless. Worse, the hole in his armor left his chest exposed. "Ace! Evacuate!" Below the steel, the sweet blood. Bloodstream cackled upon landing on the ground. He immediately moved on all fours like a hyena and rushed towards the Cossack. Sustenance, at long last. Mr. Wave took a step forward and transformed into a laser again, hitting the Psycho from behind before he could reach the Cossack. The impact shattered Bloodstream like glass, but no sooner had Mr. Wave regained his original form did the blood drops instantly fused back into a humanoid form. With a small opening, Ace opened a portal behind the Cossack. The teleporter grabbed the armored warrior and started pulling him to safety through the gate. "Incinerate him, Sunshine!" Mr. Wave shouted as he engaged Bloodstream in a duel again. He dodged a crystallized axe by sidestepping, transformed in a laser to stop blood bullets in midair before they could hit Ace, and tore through Bloodstream like paper. Mr. Wave will provide. Indeed he did. When Bloodstream threatened to pull himself back, Mr. Wave returned to human form, rotated on himself, and gored through the psycho again. The superhero kept repeating the process, preventing the criminal from fully regenerating. Knowing Mr. Wave couldn't keep this up forever, Leonard gathered plasma in his hand, forming a shining fireball hot enough to vaporize every last drop of blood. It was now or never. Time resumed again, as Ryan powered through dust and smoke. The carnival and Bloodstream had transformed the walkway into Swiss cheese, with craters all over the paved street. Len's loving father got the thrashing of his life from a crimson blur too fast for the eye to follow. Ryan barely caught a glimpse of the fighter responsible for 1 second as it turned around, a humanoid mass of red energy held together by a purple suit. Bloodstream exploded in a shower of blood, reformed, only to explode again as his foe ran into him. A freckled woman dragged an armored figure through a circular rift in spacetime itself a few meters away, with Ryan noticing an immaculate clinic on the other side. Leo the living sun floated above the area, shaping a miniature star in the palm of his hands. He would incinerate the psycho so utterly that naught but ashes would remain. None had noticed Ryan yet, the dust, smoke, and heavy rain hiding him. And for a second, he was tempted to sit back and do nothing. This might be his only chance to watch the loathsome, immortal psycho perish for good. But Len wouldn't leave without her father. She would never forgive Ryan if he left Bloodstream to die, and the carnival, the team couldn't rule out the possibility that they would go after Shorty and him next. Damn it, what should he do? Stop! Ryan shouted, firing a warning shot at the skies. He couldn't make a decision. Stop fighting! The fireball in Leo's hands faltered, as he noticed Ryan. Mr. Wave, the child. The wavelength genome stopped hitting Bloodstream to look at Ryan, the energy making up his body assembling into a phantasmal face. The psycho regenerated, while Mr. Wave raised a hand at Ryan. Kid, get back, it's dangerous. The horror was raw in his voice, and Ryan realized he made a terrible mistake. The carnival never intended to harm him or Len. They were true heroes, coming to save them from a bloodthirsty monster. But a moment of distraction was all it took for evil to prevail. Bloodstream unleashed a volley of blood bullets at the portal, one of his projectiles hitting the woman's throat while she finished dragging the armored figure through. She barely had the time to gasp before her skin ruptured, crimson blood covering her skin. Her voice turned into Bloodstream's midway through her final scream. Ace! The living sun shouted while the portal closed, the fireball in his hands dissipating. Mr. Wave, fall back. The other genome stepped back in disbelief, sidestepping to dodge Bloodstream's sharpened claws. Fall back? Matthias and the others are at the base. The living sun shouted back in alarm, flying north at extreme speed. Mr. Wave's gaze moved from Bloodstream to Ryan, and he muttered something too low for the time stopper to hear. The superhero transformed into a living laser, tearing through buildings in his teammates' direction. You're all right? Ryan asked Bloodstream, though it disgusted him to even ask. Cesare, I told you to protect your sister. Bloodstream snarled, apparently perfectly fine. Whatever damage he had suffered healed in an instant. You must listen to your father. The teen sneered in bitterness, as he realized that he would never be free of this monster. This was the perfect chance to get rid of Bloodstream for good, perhaps the only chance, and he threw it all away. But he loved Len more than he hated her father. We don't have time, Ryan replied, lowering his gun. Len's submarine will leave soon. We have to go now. Instead of answering, Bloodstream froze in place. He looked at his adoptive son with disturbing intensity, sending a shiver down Ryan's spine. Dad? Who are you? Bloodstream asked with a shaken voice. Ryan froze, as the psycho didn't recognize him. Perhaps the elixir in the boy's blood had broken the man's delusion. Or perhaps it caused him to fall into another delirium. Dad, Bloodstream's hand grabbed Ryan's throat before he could finish his sentence. The psycho's grip was strong as steel, choking the life out of him. Where is Cesare? The psycho's maddened words became a distant echo as air failed to reach Ryan's brain. The bones in his neck cracked under the strain. His hand failed to hold his gun, the weapon falling on the pavement. Where is my son? What have you done to my son? The boy attempted to freeze time and escape Bloodstream's grip, but the delirious psycho slammed his head against the pavement. A pain greater than anything Ryan ever felt coursed through his head, his vision blurring, brain matter flowing on the pavement. He couldn't think, couldn't. Where is my son? All went dark. It was true what they said. Ryan saw his life flash before his eyes as he died. Events rolled back, from his death, to that messed up battle, to the moment when the teen foolishly emerged from the smoke. And then it stopped. Ryan blinked, as he stood in the middle of the walkway. The pain had vanished, and air filled his lungs once more. The rainwater fell on his warm skin, lightning thundered above his head, and his brain was back in his skull. He was alive again. Had Ryan seen a vision of the future? A warning of what would happen if he made the wrong choice. That sounded like too much of a blue power to him, but it had felt so real. Ryan had died, and risen again. His power could also create a checkpoint, like video games. It had granted him a new chance he couldn't waste. Ryan glanced at Bloodstream, the maddened psycho prepared to strike the freckled woman with a blood volley. But this time, without the boy to distract him, Mr. Wave hit Bloodstream before he could even twitch. The woman closed the portal after dragging the armored knight through, vanishing from sight unharmed. Ryan glanced at the living sun, the fireball in his hands so bright it hurt to look at it. Bloodstream attempted to leap away to safety, but Mr. Wave turned into a laser and tore off his legs, making the madman collapse. Ryan looked at his adoptive father, the phantom sensation of his warm hands closing on his throat flashing through his mind. And as it did, the boy remembered all the times the bloodthirsty monster hit him and Len in the past. How helpless the children had felt, always cowering at his approach. How the psycho had lapsed back into his violent madness each time Ryan thought he might improve. You will never change, Ryan thought, his hand on his throat. He could almost feel Bloodstream's claws squeezing the life out of his lungs. This is you. This is what you are, and her compassion is wasted on you. Ryan owed this monster nothing but scorn. So he turned around and abandoned Bloodstream to his fate. He would tell Len he had been too late. She would despise him, but it was for the best. Ryan had seen the future firsthand and come back from it. Her father was a hopeless case, and would never improve. The living sun tossed his fireball at the walkway, the air shimmering with heat. Kid. Ryan glanced behind him. Mr. Wave had noticed his presence, just as the fireball fell upon a roaring Bloodstream like God's judgment. Kid, get down. The fireball hit the walkway and expanded outward. Ryan activated his power, running as fast he ever had before. The universe turned purple, freezing this moment in time. An expanding wall of flames consuming the walkway, with Bloodstream burning to cinders at the center. A demon cleansed in hellfire. The kind man in a suit, running after Ryan in a vain attempt to shield him from the fireball. The living sun overseeing it all from above, surrounded by steamy rainwater. Ryan's legs moved as fast as they could, straining so much that the teen feared he would collapse midway. Seconds stretched on, but Len was so far away, and the fireball so close. The light would catch up to him the moment time resumed. Please. Ryan begged, as he counted seconds from 8 to 9. More than 10. More than 10. But Ryan Romano didn't run fast enough. The frozen time shattered like glass on the 10th second, and the world exploded into flames. Ryan didn't know how long he stayed unconscious. When his feverish mind emerged from a coma to face a white wall, he thought he had perished for good and ascended to heaven. Though Shorty didn't believe in such things, her boyfriend always kept an open mind. After all, nobody who died came back from the other side. At least, nobody but Ryan himself. "Oh, you're finally awake." Ryan's eyes wandered to his right, watching the shining holographic face of Mr. Wave look at him. The superhero anxiously waited on a chair, legs crossed. Ryan blinked a few times as he regained control of his mental faculties. A bed sheet covered his body, and it looked like he recovered inside a hospital room of some kind. The teen thought he would suffer from burns, but his skin seemed healthier than ever. "I thought you," the wavelength genome paused, as if he had said something stupid. "Mr. Wave thought you might sleep forever." I thought so too." Ryan glanced at his hands. I'm alive." "Our medic does not inspire confidence at first glance, but he is good," Mr. Wave said. "His life is a perpetual struggle to keep Mr. Wave's suicidal comrades alive. Mr. Wave is too powerful to die, so he's fine." "Is Bloodstream, is he gone?" Ryan asked. The superhero joined his hands. "Your father," his voice broke. "Your father died, little Cesare. Mr. Wave is sorry." "He wasn't my father," Ryan thought, "and my name is not Cesare." "Good," he said coldly. "Good. It had to be done." The superhero winced, but thankfully didn't ask for details. He must have imagined what horrors Ryan went through. Mr. Wave has to ask, is there another clone running around? Because Mr. Wave doesn't like endless sequels. Ryan shook his head. "You got the last one." "Oh, good." He sounded relieved. "Mr. Wave will keep an eye open just in case your dad makes a comeback, but he hopes there won't be a reboot anytime soon." "What about Len?" Ryan asked, unable to understand half of what the eccentric superhero said. "Where is she? Did she take the submarine? Your sister?" Mr. Wave wants to know too. "We couldn't find her, no matter where we looked." Mr. Wave knows he scares the gods themselves, so it didn't surprise him. A shiver went down Ryan's spine. "How long was I out?" From Mr. Wave's embarrassed silence, he guessed for quite a long time. "I need to go," the teen said, rising from his bed only to almost trip. His legs felt heavy and sore, as if he just woke up from being hit by a truck. Mr. Wave caught him before he could collapse. His body felt strange to the touch, solid yet slightly fluctuating when someone touched him. Somehow, it reminded the teen of a trampoline. A true knight does not make a lady wait, but he must accept a mount's help sometimes. Mr. Wave carried Ryan on his back. "Show the way, and Mr. Wave will light it up." They didn't even take the door. For some obscure reason, the eccentric superhero insisted on going through the window, saying it was the adventurer's gate. Ryan wondered if he was sick in his head, but he didn't question a man willing to help. Though he didn't turn into a laser while carrying the teen, perhaps because it would harm him, Mr. Wave moved incredibly fast and never slowed down. Though the hospital had been in Genoa, the duo rejoined Porto Venere within minutes. Leo Hargraves had torched the whole village, probably to make sure Bloodstream didn't leave a drop behind him. When Ryan and Mr. Wave reached the boathouse's smoking ruins, they only found a pond of water. Len was long gone. Einstein famously said that the definition of insanity was to do the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. Perhaps he could turn back time too. The teen had the gut feeling his checkpoint wasn't a one-time thing, but, well, after he failed to will himself back in time. Ryan only had one way to check. He was fine with whatever happened. In a single day, he had lost everything that ever mattered to him. He just didn't see how he should go on. He felt numb and lifeless inside. If there was a chance he could make it better, he had to try. He had been proven correct. Death was the end for most, but not for him. It did him little good. His power always brought him right before the explosion. He tried everything. Protect his head. Protect his chest. Dive down. Try to freeze time. Death hurt, but not as much as the idea of losing Len. The fireball always caught up to him. Ryan couldn't outrun light. Couldn't activate his power in the split second before it hit. Couldn't turn back the clock to earlier that day. However his power worked, it had chosen the worst moment to make a new checkpoint. Ryan almost never died from the explosion itself though. Mr. Wave always managed to shield him from the flames with his body. For that, Ryan was grateful, because death hurt. But the blast always knocked the time traveler unconscious at best. Sometimes, he woke up a few hours early or days later, depending on his injuries. But he was always too late. No matter how many times Ryan tried, he couldn't catch up to Len. The time traveler was trapped in an endless cycle, never making progress. As he witnessed a Mediterranean sunset for what seemed like the 100th time, Ryan tried to understand. Did the autopilot carry Shorty away? Did she see the explosion and believe her family had perished in the blast? Ryan asked the carnival for help many times. Once, he told them Bloodstream kept a backup clone and they looked for 3 weeks to no avail. Ryan felt slightly bad about using them, especially since Mr. Wave always did his best to help him. The superhero blamed himself for Ryan's wounds, though the young man could tell from experience that the man had saved his life. But no matter how much they searched, they couldn't find any sign of the submarine, and Ryan had no way of contacting Shorty. In the last loop, he fled from the hospital and hid from his own rescuers until they gave up and moved on. The carnival always insisted he join an adoptive family, but Ryan had his fill of them. He wanted Len, and no one else. His gratefulness for the carnival turned to resentment, though he knew it was irrational. They had deprived him of Len. Perhaps it was easier for Ryan to blame others rather than himself. In the end, the teen couldn't deny the fact he caused this disaster through his own poor choice. For no matter the path he took, it always ended the same way. With Ryan Romano staring at the sunset, alone in the world. So? Enrique Manada asked, facing a computer screen. The target's last clone has been destroyed, as far as we can tell, Dr. Nathaniel Stitch answered on the other end of the video call. We are still trying to track down Len Sabino to confirm it, but otherwise it appears the threat has been dealt with. That's a relief, Enrique replied. Though his father only cared about the warehouses and genome employees whom Bloodstream had murdered, his son would have provided the carnival with support on principle. The world was better with fewer psychos in it. We will keep an eye open, in case his daughter reappears. Mr. Hargraves sends you his regards, and thanks, the doctor said. We wouldn't have been able to continue the hunt without Dynami's cooperation. It's nothing. All they did was to provide the carnival with reports of Bloodstream's movements through their own agents, and technical support in analyzing the blood samples. Enrique still shivered upon remembering Dr. Tirano's report. It is always a pleasure to collaborate with the carnival. My father still won't budge on the question of Augustus, but I hope that one day, we can make common cause against him. Perhaps one day Italy could rise again from its ashes, as a country bound by the rule of law rather than the strength of genomes. That was Enrique's sincerest wish. Now we must destroy the remaining samples, Stitch said. Incinerate them utterly. If a single cell survives long enough to find a new host, the nightmare will start over again. My brother is already taking care of ours. He burns as hot as your sun. Enrique prepared to end the call, having another reunion planned afterward. We'll keep in touch. The carnival member nodded before his screen closed. Enrique called Alphonse next, facing a glowing skeleton in a black hazmat suit. Blackthorn pitied his brother, whose power was as dangerous to his enemies as his allies. I have good news, Al, Enrique said. The carnival successfully destroyed Freddy Sabino's last remaining clone and sanitized the area. We can consider the threat dealt with. They wouldn't have to nuke Porto Venir, just to be sure. Good, Al replied gruffly. Psychos are a plague upon this land. Have you disposed of the remaining samples? Alphonse marked a short pause before answering, yes. Enrique joined his hands, sensing his brother's annoyance. You didn't like it. A power that could reshape someone's entire genetic code in an instant, you must have seen the potential as much as I did. Even Father saw it. This power could have changed everything, not only for us, but all of mankind. Its user killed countless people, and would have probably slain more. If Bloodstream had been half as cunning as Adam the Ogre and used his powers well, he might have become just as dangerous as Augustus. We have enough of one nigh-immortal psychopath on our hands, and I would rather avoid another. One cell is enough for him to return, brother. I know, he said with a grunt, still sore over it. Then you understand we made the right choice. If they wanted the world to rise from the apocalypse's ashes, they had to minimize risks for future generations. Their father only cared about money and reputation, but both Enrique and Al saw farther than he did. You did good, Alphonse. All for the dream, brother, Fallout replied, before ending the call. All for the dream. 91, Bloodline Empire. Len put her hand on the aquarium, and Bloodstream's putrid eyes looked at her. The sight filled Ryan with scorn and disgust. How? The courier asked, his own breath shortening, a sharp pain around his neck. Even after all these years, he still remembered his adoptive father's hands tightening around his throat. It was true what they said. You never forgot your first. How? Uncontrolled psychomutations, Dr. Tyranno answered with a shrug, misunderstanding the question. The vice president refused to feed him genomes, so his genetic code kept degrading into something utterly alien. The human part simply couldn't keep up with the powers after a while. A thought crossed Ryan's mind, that this was the fate that awaited all psychos, if they couldn't stave off the decay. The elixirs reshaped their bodies into something inhuman. Something better suited to contain the unlimited energies of the colored dimensions. Was Bloodstream even sentient anymore? Did an ember of humanity remain, or were only the elixirs left? Did he recognize his daughter, or the smell of her blood? Is he? Shorty's voice sounded so shaken, so weak, that Ryan could barely hear her words. Is my father in there? We chemically neutered the creature years ago, and he stopped all attempts at communication afterward, Dr. Tyranno replied with no tact whatsoever. He might have been a genius, but social relationships clearly weren't his specialty. How could you do this? Len hissed, looking at the mad scientist. There was a man inside. Not quite, management flagged him as a company asset, Tyranno said, completely missing the point. Ryan moved towards the computer panel hooked to the aquarium, his Saturn armor easily hacking into the closed system. Data showed up on his lenses, from biological analyses, to reports of knockoff testing. The courier quickly confirmed that Dynamis had Bloodstream in custody since 2016, Tyranno cloned him from samples taken after the Psycho raided a company warehouse. Ryan also noticed a folder called Monster Girl Project, which he refused to open. He had the feeling it would traumatize him for all loops to come. Most importantly though, Ryan learned that Dr. Tyranno used an encrypted email system to discuss with others, mainly his lawyers. The courier memorized the access codes, so he could directly contact the deranged genius in a future loop. Why did you want me?" Len asked, pointing her water rifle at Tyranno. The Dino-maniac raised his hands in surrender. "What was the point?" "Because your father implanted a foreign agent inside your blood cells, and it causes the knockoff to react violently on contact," Tyranno confessed. "Since the old agent inside your blood precedes the chemical neutering, synthesis creates a new substance capable of resisting it. Our consumers inevitably reverse. A polite way to say they transformed into bloodstream clones. I petitioned management to study you in depth and reduce risks of reversion, but Mr. Enrique kept vetoing my proposal," the scientist complained. It made the courier respect Blackthorn a bit more than before. "Here's the million-dollar question then," Ryan said, glancing at the bloody Shoggoth floating in its aquarium. "How do we kill this thing?" Len flinched. "Riri." "Len, your father is gone," Ryan argued, waving a gloved hand at the psychoinacan. "He's not even human anymore." You said you could find a cure for psychos," she protested. "I think we can cure humans of their mutations, not turn tomato juice into a Homo sapien." Ryan watched, as Len's weapon shook from her trembling hands. "I'm reading the analysis reports right now, and he shares less than 50% of his DNA with humans now. Bananas are closer to us than he is. Even with all the time in the world, which Ryan had, they would need a genome with a miracle solution power. Besides, the courier had no intention of wasting so much time on helping that irredeemable monster. He had raided this lab to confirm Bloodstream's survival, but the boogeyman that haunted his childhood appeared long gone. Ryan would have given all his money to see Len's reaction beneath her helmet. She stood still for a moment, before lowering her head and weapon both. She didn't say a word, as she registered her friend's words. Perhaps she always knew it would end like this, remaining in denial until she had the facts laid before her eyes. The father she loved died years ago. "I don't suppose you have a cure for knockoffs?" Ryan asked Tyranno. "Of course we have a cure," the mad genius protested, much to the courier's surprise. "Do you think we're criminally negligent? You turned a monster into a drink." Ryan replied bluntly. "You're worse than Pepsi. But the risks of reversion and health issues approach zero, as long as only one dose is used. Which is exactly why I'm nationalizing this place and confiscating all its assets. Including you. You can't nationalize a perso. I'm President of the United States of America, which is basically the world," Ryan interrupted him. "We're nationalizing you, and your cure. How does it work?" The scientist opened his mouth to protest further, until Ryan pointed at his chest weapon. The perks of a monopoly on force. "I developed an injection-based neutralizing agent, which attacks the bloodstream cells and repairs the target's genetic code back to its pre-consumption state," Dr. Scaley admitted. "A stronger variant of the formula can be injected inside the aquarium in case of a containment breach. It destroys the knockoffs entirely." "But not alchemist-made elixirs?" Ryan asked for confirmation, the genius shaking his head. It made sense. Bloodstream-based knockoffs remained mutated psycho cells in the end, while true elixirs were alien entities beyond conventional biology. If your cure only works through injections, then what happens if multiple knockoff users revert at the same time? Even if you destroy the original source, it won't erase the substance inside all your customers. The risk of a mass reversion is non-existent, Tyranno replied with a shrug, tempting fate. These guys had no plan at all. Dynami's criminal negligence defied comprehension. All right, in that case, you're surrendering that cure, and coming with us to Area 51. The dinosaur squinted. Area 51? A Mecran base, if you want to be technical. Since Ryan knew the location of others, they could always retreat there to research a cure for the psycho condition. He had made a promise to Saw, Bianca, and would keep it. We can make safer knockoffs than the bottled slimes you harvest here. Elixirs that follow health safety protocols. A Mecran base? The genius eyes lit up in interest. He couldn't resist the lure of a Mecran-made lab. You know what? I am under contract not to work for the competition, but if you abduct me I won't resist too much. I think kidnapping counts as force majeure? In my case? It's an act of God. Ryan defended religious tolerance, but only for his own cult. Now, where is your bloodstream vaccine? We're euthanizing him on our way out. Len didn't even respond, much to Ryan's surprise. He had expected her to fight back his decision, but finding the truth had shaken her to the core. Ryan downloaded the bloodstream vaccine's data, to use in a future loop. Now, they had to figure out a way to leave the building with Tyranno, if possible. Since Ryan knew about the encrypted emails and confirmed bloodstream's survival, he could always contact the scientist in the future and optimize the Lab 66 raid. His armor's sensors suddenly noticed a sharp increase in temperature. No. Shorty, get down. Ryan shouted, but his friend didn't listen. She gazed at the aquarium without a word, lost in her thoughts. Shorty. One of the room's walls melted in a crimson flash. The blast came from the previous room, clearing off the debris blocking the path outside. Ryan covered his helmet with his hand, as a cloud of dust filled the laboratory. Alphonse Monada had returned, a living incarnation of nuclear flames. But he wasn't alone. A small troop of men in power armor followed him, led by none other than his brother Blackthorn. Vines and moss covered the Il Miglior manager's armor like a second protective layer, and he alone carried no firearm. Still, he didn't look happy to be there, glancing at the aquarium with disgust. None of this would have happened, if you and father didn't lie to me back then, Enrique said, as his men raised their weapons at Len and Ryan. The courier prepared to fight his way out. Wyvern was right. This can't go on anymore. It will all work out in the end, you'll see, his brother replied, lying to himself. As for father, he will be out of the picture after this, one way or another. Fallout raised his hand at Ryan and Len, but didn't open fire. The risk of breaching the aquarium was too great. All your men are dead, and you are surrounded, he threatened. Give up. I don't think so, Ryan said, moving closer to Len while Tyranno hid behind his computer. I've still got the A-bomb in my backpack. If you want a big ol' mushroom salad, you'll get it. I don't believe you, Alphonse replied, calling the bluff. I don't understand what you intended to do here, Muty, but you failed. Shorty, cover me, Ryan said. He couldn't take Fallout head-on, but they could bypass him if they played their cards right. But his friend didn't answer. Shorty? Len raised her water rifle at the aquarium, and opened fire. A pressurized liquid stream hit the glass before Ryan could stop time. The private security had opened fire at Len while Enrique vainly raised a hand to tell them to stop. Their lasers were frozen in midair, so the courier tackled Len to the ground out of their reach. Shorty, what the Ryan couldn't finish his sentence, as he took a good look at her helmet. He could only see thick black blood wriggling behind the visor. Ryan glanced at the captive bloodstream in horror, the monster's putrid eyes staring at his daughter with sinister intensity. While the creature was no longer sentient, his proximity triggered the infection inside Shorty and allowed it to take her over. Some of the lasers hit the aquarium's protective barrier as time resumed, and Alphonse charged forward with an angry roar. Len's visor exploded, blood tendrils coming out of it and forcing Ryan to leap back. The courier could only watch as blood leaked from his friend's scaphandra armor, the substance having consumed her from within. As for the aquarium, the glass had cracked and shed tears of blood. Ryan barely had the time to take a few steps as Len's tendrils joined with the slime trapped inside the aquarium. And Bloodstream screamed. The aquarium violently detonated as the imprisoned monster grew in size and strength. The monstrous ooze grew, fanged maws hissing in a maddening cacophony, glistening blue eyes as wide as TV screens, and porous holes unleashing geysers of green flux particles. A strange alien moss formed on anything these particles touched, like an infection from another reality. Ryan wished he could erase his memory at will, as he watched Len's armor absorbed into the ooze she once called a father. The ogre devoured his daughter. Blackthorn extended his vines to bring Tyranno to safety, but too late. Red slime drowned the scientist, and Alphonse had to use an atomic blast to keep the monster at bay. The ooze took a stream of nuclear fire to the face, but instantly regenerated. Bloodstream's monstrous form kept expanding, filling the room with its vile flesh. Now that it had consumed Len, the monster turned its attention to Ryan. Those glistening alien eyes showed neither intelligence nor a sign of recognition, only hunger. The mind had deteriorated beyond saving, and only the instinct to spread remained. Bloodstream had become a virus. Worse, some of the private security members started screaming, blood flowing out of their armor and shattering their visors. The knockoffs in their circulatory system had started reverting, though Ryan didn't know how far the effect extended. What's his range? Ryan muttered to himself, a disturbing thought crossing his mind. Sprinklers rained a white substance in the room, probably Tyranno's vaccine. But the liquid failed to affect the empowered bloodstream, the mutated horror turning into a bloody tidal wave. Ryan froze time the second his cooldown period ended, and fled as fast as he could. Alphonse Monada had formed an energy shield around his brother and himself, repelling both the tidal wave of blood and his own men. Ryan glanced at Tyranno, but the man had already drowned inside the eldritch Red Sea. The courier fled through the hole in the wall, leaving the Monadas to fend off for themselves. Ryan couldn't take the risk of Bloodstream getting past his armor. If the monster somehow managed to take him over and corrupt his save point, Ryan had to return to Livia to finish the memory transfer. "I gotta get back," he whispered to himself, as he reached what remained of the cloning factory. Back to the past. The roof had collapsed on the cloning factory, burying the room and Ryan's dead allies beneath tons of rubble, though Alphonse Monada had successfully melted a path. With the ceiling gone, acid raindrops were falling on the ground from a hole above. Ryan activated his jetpack, just as time resumed. A flood of blood overflowed into the factory an instant later, spreading through the building. Ryan managed to escape the flood, flying in the skies above the Dynami's HQ. If Bloodstream could generate mass from nowhere, then it meant his mutations had empowered him beyond his original powers. But Ryan didn't understand how much, until he took a good look at New Rome. The city had turned red. People mutated everywhere Ryan looked, blood bursting from their skin to transform them into Bloodstream clones. Every knockoff elixir across New Rome had reverted to its original nature. Genomes turned into monsters, attacking the uninfected like rabid dogs. On the ground, Ryan watched a single Bloodstream clone fire crystallized spikes at private security personnel. Everyone scratched by the projectiles joined the zombie horde. Fires had spread everywhere, with even the acid downpour unable to drench them. Mount Augustus had turned into a fiery candle, the smoke coming from it obscuring the skies for miles, and Rust Town didn't look any better. His power has no range anymore, Ryan realized, his throat sore from the phantom pain of his first loop. The whole world. He will spread to the whole world. He will become the world. This was a nightmare. Helen? Ryan shouted. The acid downpour continued to fall somehow. Helen, where are you? He caught sight of her on the ground. A bloody monster, switching places with raindrops as it fell down on the uninfected like a hawk on mice. Bloodstream could not only infect genomes, but keep using their powers. If he infected Ryan, Bloodstream would gain access to time travel. Alchemo? Brain dead, are you there? Ryan called the rest of his team in frantic panic, only to be met with radio silence. Anyone? But nobody answered. Ryan thought he would only care for T, but her father's silence, it made his heart ache for a moment. Damn it, this was the third apocalypse taking place in New Rome since he started, and the worst by far. Livia? Ryan called while changing the frequency. The building below him turned red, as the ever-growing bloodstream shattered the window and flowed down the steel walls like a waterfall. A long tendril 30 meters in size attempted to capture the courier, who dodged and flew away south of the city. Livia? If bloodstream got to her before he did. A soft, reassuring voice answered his plea, Ryan. Ryan let out a breath of relief. Livia, are you well? Yes, I'm in a safe house in Sorrento. She marked a short pause, her breath hastening in panic. Ryan, what's going on? My visions. I can't believe what I'm seeing. It's raining blood outside. Thank God, his first lady had made it to the Cheyenne Mountains. Barricade yourself and prepare for the memory transfer. I'm sending you the data I gathered. Record it and don't touch anyone but me. Not a drop of blood. It's Dynamis, isn't it? She guessed, coughing. Is it too late to do anything? It's too late this time, Ryan replied bluntly, his fists clenching in rage. But not for the next. He could have sworn she had nodded on the other end of the line. Don't die on the way, Livia pleaded. I will be waiting for you. Ryan cut communications, as he crossed paths with other flyers in the skies. Leo the Living Sun and Shroud oversaw the devastation in shaken silence, though the latter created a cloud of flying glass shards upon seeing the president approach. Truce! Ryan shouted, crossing his arms. Truce! You caused this. Shroud snarled. This is all your FAU. Leo Hargraves broke out of his trance and raised a hand to stop his comrade. He understood that at this point, they couldn't afford to fight. Not even a dashing supervillain. Is your sister, Sunshine asked Ryan, acidic rain turning to colored steam on contact. Is she dead? Ryan looked away, his silence a confirmation in itself. Leo the Living Sun looked down in complete defeat. I'm sorry, for her. And for you, Matthias. We failed your mother's last request. We couldn't stop it, Shroud muttered to himself, his voice breaking in sadness and despair. You knew this would happen? Ryan asked, more disappointed with himself than anything. It was foretold, so we tried to destroy Bloodstream, but Leonard struggled to find his words. We failed. We only delayed the disaster, Mr. See-Through said, before glancing at his teammate. Leo, you have to do it. If I unleash my full power, everyone in the city will burn, Leo warned. Ryan had never heard him sound so defeated. Millions will perish. And if a single bird gets away, the whole world will follow. Shroud let out a sigh of resignation. There is no other way. The whole world is affected, Ryan said. Even though he would reload soon, he didn't think Leonard deserved to have these deaths on his conscience in any timeline. Dynamis has genomes outside New Rome, and they probably turned. It's useless. But it will delay the virus spread, Shroud insisted. We can gain enough time to protect other calm. Thunder echoed above their heads. Crimson lightning struck Shroud, cooking his flesh within his own glass armor. The bolt formed a hole in his chest, vaporizing organs and sending the vigilante falling down to a burning street below. Leo let out a shout of horror and surprise, while Ryan looked up at the bolt's source. Hargraves. Augustus descended from the clouds above, clad in crimson lightning like a shining angel cast down to earth. I should have known you were involved. Lightning Butt's clothes had been torn to shreds, but the man himself was unharmed. His right hand carried the upper half of a destroyed rabbit plushie, its white fur blackened by ashes. The gods had won the lepromachia. You fool! Leo snarled at his archenemy, his flames now blindingly bright. The world is at stake here. The only world I want to live in, Mob Zeus replied with his fist raised, is one where your sun has set. Moving as fast as Ryan on a good day, the warlord punched Leo in the chest, his fingers tearing through the flames to hit a burning core underneath. The blow sent the living sun crashing onto the ground, the impact vaporizing bloodstream clones into ashes. You! Ryan snarled in true fury, as Lightning Zeus charged lightning to smite his fallen foe. This maniacal man would put his personal vendetta above anything else. You selfish discount ivory statue, I've had enough. You're going down somehow. Mob Zeus looked at him with murder on his mind, and Ryan cursed his tongue. The courier reflexively stopped time just as the discount Greek god unleashed an electrical storm in his direction. Though the purple world overshadowed New Rome and trapped it between 2 seconds, neither Augustus nor his lightning slowed down. The invulnerable man completely shrugged the time stop off. But Vulcan made the best armor, and Ryan expected the unexpected. Mob Zeus blinked as the courier's chest weapon absorbed the crimson bolt. The mechanism didn't have a limitless energy storage capacity, but it gave the time traveler enough time to strike back. Though he knew it was useless, Ryan punched Augustus in the face with all his might. And it felt good. His armored fist hit the man's ivory cheek, violet and black particles swirling around his fingers. Ryan expected to hurt himself more than discount Zeus, especially since it felt like hitting a wall of diamond, but to his surprise, the blow startled the tyrant. The punch didn't inflict any damage, and seemed no more effective than a light slap, but it shorted out the lightning halo for an instant. For a brief moment, Ryan could see the old man beneath the godly facade, his eyes widening in shock while the courier's fist still touched his cheek. Lightning Butt's gaze turned from surprise to fury, and if the courier wasn't mistaken, a hint of fear. I felt that, Augustus said. Time unfroze as Ryan registered these words, and Mob Zeus punched back. He hit harder than Wyvern, Adam the Ogre, and anyone else Ryan ever fought before. His fist cracked the armor's chest protection, shattering the weapon beneath into scraps, and sent the courier flying backward. The time traveler hit a building, came out on the other side, and barely managed to regain control of his flight before he crashed on the ground. The jetpack had survived the blow, but the armor had been breached. A single drop of blood could slip through. Even now he sensed an acid raindrop burn his skin below the steel. So Ryan immediately focused on regaining altitude, and looked behind him. Thankfully for the courier, Hargraves had engaged Augustus in melee, delaying him for now. Sunshine had become a blinding star blazing across the skies, his heat causing the atmosphere to simmer around him. However, Ryan could see the shadow of his invulnerable enemy trying to grab the living sun's core, perhaps that was Hargraves' sole weakness. The living sun's fires burned Augustus' clothes, but they couldn't melt his ivory body. Leo could delay his foe, but not defeat him. Eventually, the superhero would either retreat or perish. And then Augustus would go after Ryan. The president redirected all remaining power to his jetpack, and left New Rome in the dust. It took Ryan 1 hour to reach Livia's hideout. New Rome had long vanished in a flash of crimson light by then, its buildings, its land, its people incinerated. Whether Alphonse Monada went nuclear or sunshine turned into a supernova, Ryan would never know. Though he was miles away by then, the courier still felt the blast's shockwave. It changed nothing. As the courier flew over a forest, he watched the trees turning red, their leaves transforming into organs, their bark into crystallized blood. Even some birds had turned into abominations, pursuing Ryan to infect him, though they were too slow to catch up. The sight filled the time traveler with horror. This blue planet would soon turn red. He found Livia waiting for him in Sorrento, south of New Rome. She stood on the roof of the same building where Ryan had been evacuated, back when the Meta blew up the city. The courier thought the Augusti princess was foolish to expose herself, before noticing the ring of ash surrounding the building. Dozens, if not hundreds of turrets formed an impregnable perimeter around the safe house, vaporizing any bloodstream clone approaching. Thankfully, the security system recognized his armor and let him pass. "Remind me to send chocolates to Vulcan after the reset," Ryan said as he landed on the roof, covering his chest with one hand. Acid rain's raindrops had eaten at his chest, blood dripping from the cracks left by Augustus. Though not perfect, no one can deny her security systems are effective. Livia's eyes wandered to his wound with concern, and though he warned her not to touch blood of any kind, her fingers trailed against his chest of steel. "Who did this to you?" "Your dad," Ryan replied, causing Livia to bite her lower lips. Even with the world going down in flames, he still wanted revenge above all else. "I see," she said, her eyebrows furrowing. "And Len? The others?" "Just me." Ryan let out a tired sigh. "Again. And over again. Just us." Livia looked at him with pity and compassion. "This is what you were trying to stop? Or something else? I can't imagine the burden on your shoulders. It must have been agonizing. There is still time to change this terrible ending." Ryan had the data he needed for his perfect run now. All pieces of the New Rome puzzle. He only needed to assemble them in the correct sequence. Yes. But next time, Livia looked up at him with determination. "Next time, you won't carry this cross alone, Ryan. I swear to you." "No." Ryan would have other people to help carry his load. Livia, Len, Alchemo, and others. Their memories would endure this reset, and he would ferry their minds across space and time. The time traveler opened the Saturn armor's backpack, bringing out a metal helmet. He carefully put it on Livia's head, and hooked the device to his suit's chronoradio. "Will it hurt?" she asked. "Only for me, but don't worry. I'm immortal." "I won't tell anyone," she replied with a smile. "We'll find a painless way next time. I won't have you die for our mistakes." Ryan almost told her not to make promises she couldn't keep, but though this loop ended bleakly, it also filled his heart with hope. Next loop would be different than anything that came before. The courier had no idea if his power would even stay the same, now that the Black World's power coursed through his veins. This reset was a dive into the unknown. But someone would wait for him on the other side. "We'll see," Ryan said as he activated his power. He halted the march of time, his armor turning dark purple. A torrent of violet particles surrounded him and Livia like a flood, with the occasional black spot floating among them like oil in the water. The courier noticed an ivory man flying in their direction, far too late to change anything. As the transfer finished and this loop collapsed in an ocean of violet particles, Ryan thought back to his brief fight with Augustus. He had wondered what wish the Black Ultimate One granted him, but now he had his answer. "What did you call a power that could kill immortals?" "A paradox."